everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Thanks for coming back and checking me out. Hopefully you're enjoying all the videos on my channel so far, and particularly the videos in this video series entitled Spiritual Impacts. If you haven't checked them out yet, go back and have a look at the playlist, because now we're on episode 5. And in episode 5 we're going to talk about communication with spirits before the person has physically passed away. So hopefully you're going to find this video interesting. I feel you will, because a lot of people ask me questions about, how long does it take before I should have a reading? How long does it take a spirit to come through after the person's physically passed? Because there are different views and opinions out there. Naturally, there are going to be different views and opinions on it. Some mediums I've heard say it takes at least 6 months before the spirit can come through, and a variety of different timelines that I've heard. But this video will hopefully show you that that's not necessarily true, and actually you can't put a time frame on spirit. They'll come through when they want to come through. And as I always say, I only speak from my own personal experience and what I have personally experienced in my own readings that I've done for other people. And these next two examples will show you that you can't put a timeline on when spirit come through. And these two examples also had that impact on me, because even when I think about them now, they still kind of blow me away a little bit, because I was still new in my development of mediumship when these two things happened. So because I don't ever take for granted what I do, but the fact that these things happened in this way, it still blows my mind a little bit. But let's get into these examples. So the first example I'm going to give happened, must have been about 1.5 years, 2 years into my development as a medium. So I was still a baby, and so I kind of still am really, but I was still a baby into my mediumship journey. And it was for a lady that was on via video call. And as usual, I don't ask questions. I just give what I'm getting from spirit. And obviously back at that time, only been 2 years into it, you still kind of doubt in your head sometimes what you're seeing, what you're perceiving, etc, etc. But you learn just to give what you're being shown. And this gentleman had come through, and I described him, how he looked, his character, personality, other bits and pieces of evidence, memories and things of that sort. And the lady took everything. I actually got some names as well, if I remember correctly, and she could match the name to the person and other names and family, etc, etc. So she was very happy, and I was bringing through his message and whatever else. And as an evidential medium, I always want the validation, because sometimes we can be wrong. I could be sat there talking out my arse, and just going on and on and on. So I like the validation, because that then builds the connection stronger. You get more evidence coming through, which is the point, right? You want the evidence. So I again gave everything, and she completely understood. So I was happy with that. And then came I guess you call it the learning point here, where it all changed. And she said, I know exactly who that is. I'm so happy that he's all right, because he actually hasn't physically passed yet. And I was like, what? What do you mean he's not actually physically passed yet? She said, no, this gentleman is my kind of ex-father-in-law, but they were still very close, almost like a blended family, who's currently in hospital on a life support machine. He's had his last rites read to him. The only thing that's keeping him alive is the machine. And I'm sat there scratching my head thinking, should I be impressed by this, that I've picked that up, or should I be mortified in the fact that I've brought through a spirit person who's not actually physically died yet? So you can imagine the confusion in my own mind, thinking, I'm glad I got that information. I'm glad she could take comfort from it. But at the same time, I've kind of just told somebody that without knowing that the person's going to pass. But ultimately, she knew, the family knew, that this man was going to pass, and he did shortly afterwards. So, you think about that situation, you think, how did that happen? Well, it shows me, and I say this to people as well, is that when we pass, especially if we're already ill or have some kind of condition, when we physically pass, the spirit of us, our soul, doesn't just jump out of the body and say, right, see you later, I've gone now. There's a process that the spirit, it starts to leave your physical body bit by bit. It doesn't just jump out, unless there's an accident or a murder or, God forbid, a suicide, something like that, where it's a shock to the system. But the spirit starts to leave bit by bit, and this gentleman was ill. So it's like his spirit had come to say goodbye to her before he'd actually physically passed, because at that point he couldn't physically say goodbye because he was being kept alive by a machine. So that example goes to show that you can't put a time on that, because that spirit had already started to make that transition to the spirit world. But luckily she took comfort from him coming through to say, look, I'm all right, you know, let me go, kind of thing. That's the first example. And it only happened one more time, and this actually involved my mum, actually. And I was doing one of those live streams on Facebook, right? So I can't see the person, I can't see anybody, they're seeing me, I can only see their comment. And I remember bringing through actually, let's go to reverse that a little bit. My mum had just got home from work, so she's just caught me. She's just got in from work, because my mum is one of my biggest fans, and she jumped on the Facebook stream and started watching. And I brought through this lady called Doreen, and it was very clear in my head that her name was Doreen, because she kept saying Doreen and pointing to herself saying, Doreen, me, Doreen. And I described her character. I described the one particular cup she used to drink out of. I described the last and only thing that she could eat, which was crumpets. I remember that. There's a chain or something that I brought through as well. And other specific bits and pieces, how she looked in particular, her hair to her glasses, her stature. And nobody could take it. And that's one of the most frustrating things for a medium, is that when you have got a crowd of people observing you, whether it be in a live environment or even online, it's frustrating, because you know that the spirit person has come here for somebody. They've come here to make a connection with somebody and to give some kind of message. And no one could take this woman. And she was very adamant that she was called Doreen and this is her, and all that other stuff that that she brought through, which I can't remember now. So I kind of left it. I said, right, okay, I'm gonna have to ask her to step back. If no one can take it, I'm gonna just break that connection and just send her off back up to the spirit world. And to my surprise, the next day, I think it's the next morning, my mum had texted me and she said, you'll never guess what. And I was like, what have I done? And she said, that Doreen that you spoke about last night on your Facebook, I said, yeah. She said, she passed away at, I think it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was like, what? And basically, my mum worked in a care home, and Doreen was one of the residents of the care home, and my mum didn't make any connections with it at the time on my live, because on that particular day, they were very busy, and obviously my mum was going around and seeing to the other older people, and Doreen was still alive, and she kept trying to get my mum's attention that day. She kept calling her name. She wouldn't call any of the other nurses or carers, she kept calling my mum. And anyway, fast forward a little bit, my mum finished her shift that day, and then that's when she came home to watch my live. And my mum got a text from the care home to say at about 3 o'clock that morning, Doreen had actually physically passed away. So again, it's that still blows my mind, because my perspective on that is that it was Doreen's way. It's almost like Doreen's soul knew that she was going to pass before Doreen consciously knew about it. Her soul and her spirit knew that she was going to pass the next day, which is why she kept calling out to my mum, because I think my mum was one of her favourite carers. She kept calling my mum, and my feeling is because also my mum was busy with other residents as well, that was Doreen's way of saying goodbye to my mum, because my mum wasn't going to be on shift the next day, so my mum wasn't going to see her physically. So Doreen's soul knew that she was going to pass when my mum wasn't there, so her soul come to say goodbye and thank you for caring. I think that was the message: goodbye and thank you for caring for me. And that still like sends a shiver through my body, because how I described Doreen to how she looked, and to the cup she drank out of, to her character, to that crumpet. She couldn't keep anything down, or she couldn't swallow anything, a lot of things. So crumpets were the only thing, apparently, that Mum told me, that she could eat and swallow and keep down. There's no way on earth I'd know those things about her, especially her name. So that again cemented to me that there is no time in the spirit world. There is none of this. You need to wait 6 months before they come through. It takes 6 months for this, takes a year for that, or whatever it might be. So those two examples really show me that. So the lesson I would say for anyone that's developing is always go with what you experience, because there will be mediums out there which will tell you, no, that's rubbish, they can't come through until they're physically passed or whatever. But they can, because those two experiences that I had proved that they can. I've had the opposite end of the scale as well, where someone's daughter sadly passed when they were 2 months old. It took the daughter, because I did this reading, it took that child 16 years to come through and communicate with her mum. So I've had both ends of the spectrum. So again, I would say, you can't put a time on it. So if you are developing as a medium, go with your experience. Don't let other mediums pollute your mind with, no, it has to be this way, it can only be that way, it has to be that amount of time, this amount of time. No. You go with what you are feeling, what you're sensing coming through. And like those two experiences I had, I didn't realise at the time that I was saying these things that they hadn't physically passed yet. I was just communicating with the spirit of the person and bringing through what they wanted to bring through. So it wasn't like I was consciously thinking, oh, they haven't passed yet. No, I was just giving what I was getting. So you just have to allow these things to flow. So if you are thinking about going for a reading with a loved one who's passed not so long ago, obviously there's no guarantee that a loved one's going to come through straight away. Some spirit people, depending on their soul's evolution, will take longer to come through than others. You just have to be open-minded to the fact that they might not come through yet. If they died a week ago, they might not be ready to come through at that point, because you need to be ready. Spirit are very intelligent, and they know when the right time is to come through and say goodbye or give you a certain message. If your grief is still very, very raw, you're not necessarily, with respect, going to be in the right frame of mind to receive that communication, because you want that person here. You want them physically here. So that's going to cloud your maybe ability to hear what they want to say, because I never know what spirit's going to say. They come through with some very personal things, very emotional things. And what a reading should always be uplifting, give you a sense of peace. A reading should never leave you distressed. And if you are still in the early stages of grief and it's still very, very raw, what can happen is, although the communication is always positive and never bring anything negative through, it can leave you feeling distressed because it is so raw. So for you need to keep your mind open to that. You need to be in a good place mentally and emotionally to receive that communication from spirit. So it's not necessarily about giving spirit time to come through, it's about giving yourself time to be able to be the receiver of the message and the evidence that the spirit wants to give you. But that's it. I hope you found this video interesting, and I hope it answers some of those questions, because those questions do come at me quite a lot as to how long does it take. So I hope it's answered those things. But that is episode 5 down. As I said earlier on in the video, if you've not checked out the previous episodes, please do. There's a playlist on my channel which is for the Spiritual Impacts video series. So do go and check it out, and I'll see you in the next episode.